info about the history of digital humanities at Gonzaga, and then we can talk about how all of these teaching faculty members think about digital humanities in their teaching practices. So first and foremost, my name is Katey Roden. I'm the visiting scholar in digital humanities, and I also teach in the English department and Women's and Gender Studies department. And it is absolutely so exciting to start this new initiative here at Gonzaga. The Digital Humanities Initiative began 2 years ago as a reading group led by our dean in the College of Arts and Sciences, wherein a core group of interdisciplinary faculty members got together periodically and read literature on the best practices of digital humanities as a field and began thinking about how we might implement digital humanities work in our classrooms and in our curriculum here at Gonzaga. We've spent the last 2 years familiarizing ourselves with the field and developing assignments and pitching projects large and small. And today we'll talk a little bit about what digital humanities is and where we see it going here at Gonzaga. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce the members of our working group who were able to join us this morning. We have Veta Schlimgen in the history department, Ginger Gray in English, and Jessica Halliday in English. And these are perhaps the best members of our groups because they do digital humanities and have been doing it longer than digital humanities has been an initiative here at Gonzaga. So they have a lot of experience to share with us. So I think that one of the first things that we were planning on doing, and of course the tech didn't work because we are in a basement and didn't have the wireless connection that we thought we would, which is digital, is to kind of define what digital humanities actually is. So we were going to have you do some nice text-savvy work that we would ask our students to do in class by texting your definition of digital humanities to an online poll. But instead, given that we have this nice intimate environment, I wonder, what do you all got up on a rainy morning and came to a digital humanities panel, so I'm curious, what do you think digital humanities is? And there's no wrong answer, so don't be afraid.
Because people disagree even in the field,
yes.
Right? So even just we're looking for 1 or 2 words that you think of.
What comes to mind?
Yeah.
What did you think you were going to hear about when you got here? Good morning.
I was thinking it would be somehow interdisciplinary and linking things together.
Yeah, absolutely. So interdisciplinary. I wish I had a whiteboard.
I've got it. I'm writing it down.
Oh.
And, you think of humanities, you think very low tech, so, anything digital, implies high tech. And, like I said, I think of humanities, I think of books.
Sure.
So
The analog form, right?
Right. So moving anywhere from, a paper book to something, electronic is, so how, what exactly are we seeing in that transition?
Mm-hmm.
So we think books, we think low tech, we think interdisciplinary, so moving from low tech to higher tech. Any other thoughts about what digital humanities means when you thought you would come to this panel?
Or questions?
Yes.
Well, I guess my question was really, what exactly, what exactly does it mean? What is it? So,
Lots of definitions out there. One of them is where the humanities intersects with technology and how the humanities can make itself more relevant, visible, available through platforms that traditionally we've never used, which has resulted in information really being located in the academia, right? And students have created work or learned about things in academia, but then they go out into the real world and it's not exactly there in the same way. But technology is allowing us to put student creation and research out in a way that we couldn't before, as well as students being able to access and collaborate, globally, basically, to create.
Mm-hmm. So, what you all were gesturing to in your definitions is precisely one of the key tensions in digital humanities, that we think of the humanities as low tech or non-tech. I imagine we can all remember some English teacher fumbling around on a computer, and that's been me.
That was this morning.
Very frequently. That was us earlier today. We think of the humanities classroom as a place where we open the nice dusty old book and get to work on something like metaphor. But digital humanities allows us to kind of cross-disciplinary divides by using technology. So at Gonzaga, the working definition for digital humanities that our working group and our initiative has created is really a collaborative and interdisciplinary space where technological innovation and capability intersect with teaching and scholarship. So it's technology meets humanities questions. That's a big, fancy definition, but I like to encourage my students to think about it as asking the same basic humanities questions that humanities classes have always asked. What does it mean to be human? How do human beings interact with each other? All of these big questions that we think of with humanities classes that we now get to ask and interrogate in new and different ways because of technological innovation. So I wonder if we could think of some examples of what that means, because very often we hear big, sort of arcane definitions like that, but what does digital humanities mean to you all in your classrooms?
Well, I think it might be important to think about how a lot of times we say, oh, it's good to have technology in the classroom. Oh, we want to have technology in the classroom. But a lot of times what that means is we're sort of having technology for technology's sake, and it's not really integrated into the class purpose or the work that students are doing. And so digital humanities really tries to connect with where students are, what is the world that they are actually living in. And so not just using some fancy thing in the classroom because it's some fancy thing, but that it's really integral to the learning or to the project that they're working on. So that's what we strive for when we are crafting those assignments.
Yeah. I would use an example. So I don't know
Yeah,
if
give
it's-
us your history.
Okay. So I'm in the history department, which means that what they've been talking about, this theoretical here, digital humanities is about the intersection of disciplines and using technology to express ideas that we talk about in the humanities. So what does it mean to be human? How do humans get along? But as a historian, I always want to go back to a concrete example. So perhaps one of the ways we can think about this and to give you more insight into what we're talking about, I'll give you an example.
Let's scoot off to the side so we can.
So I had a student last spring who did an internship with me. Let's see. And my student, if he had not been using a digital interface, he would have gone over to the archives here at Gonzaga. He did research into one of the many collections we have. This collection was of letters that students sent back to their teacher, who was a Jesuit working at a high school in central Washington. And these students were drafted during World War II. They were sent all over the world, but they maintained this correspondence with their teacher throughout the years of the war. That collection is in the archive. So my student would have gone in and he would have read the letters and he would have analyzed them and said, oh, here's where they were writing from, here's what they were writing about. This gives us insights into what it was like to be a young man fighting in World War II and the relationship that he had with, or the relationships they maintained with their former teacher. But with this type of interface, this is a open source website that allowed him to make that story much more dynamic and engaging. And so he decided to focus on Father Egan, who was that's the name of the priest, the man that all of these kids, or I guess young men, maintained contact with throughout the war years. And he mapped it geographically onto the world, the places that they were writing from and what they were writing about. And he does tell a story, so this format that he uses allows him to move around and tell the story of the priest, his background, where he was born, where he was trained, how it is that he ended up in the state of Washington. So he comes to Gonzaga. He attends St. Louis University. So it shows how dynamic his life was in terms of the places that he lived, the places where he learned, and then the places where he taught at Marquette High School. Is anybody from Yakima? Anybody from Washington? Oh, good. Okay. And so he talks about the students, where they were trained, and what I really love about this this project, and I'll go back to the overview here, is that he is able to show how the world was really interconnected to Father Egan through this global correspondence that he maintained with his students while they were off fighting the Second World War. And one of the really exciting things that he had and the challenges he had to face was that some of these letters were, they were read by the censors, the military censors, who would, redact some information and sometimes the place. So often he would get letters, the Father Egan would get letters from the South Pacific. So there's this vast territory somewhere out there in the world. And so my student had to deal with that. He couldn't tell from the letters. He didn't have enough clues to figure out where these young men were. So he placed them somewhere in the South Pacific. You can see. So what I really like about this example is that it shows us what digital technology can do for the humanities and what the humanities can do for everyone else. Because by using this format, my student is able to tell the story not just of Father Egan, but of all his students. And he can present it in a way that's innovative and new. It's very different from the papers that students write in classes and the papers I'm sure you remember writing. And so it's a different format, so he has to think a little bit differently about the presentation. But also he's telling a story that now is going to be available beyond my classroom or even beyond Gonzaga. That we're going to put this up and make it live after we work with a student. And so this is a story then that can go way beyond Gonzaga, which is another dynamic that I really like about digital humanities.
And this is the really powerful piece that digital humanities brings to the table. That our students then, we often think of humanities students as researchers and thinkers, and we think of the STEM fields and the sciences and engineering students as builders. But digital humanities allows our students to build, to not be rote receptacles of knowledge and information where we as the faculty members lecture or assign the book, but we get to wander in the woods of inquiry and creation with our students. And that's a really powerful thing as a faculty member, to engage in technology practices with students where I might not have all the answers. And then I don't operate as the expert in the class, but we get to experience the technology together. And bridging that divide has been an incredibly powerful experience for me in classrooms, and I know for all of you as well. I think we should look at one other example.
Yeah.
And what's fantastic about these examples in particular is that they're student produced.
I think another thing that an assignment like that shows, Jessica was saying earlier that we really want to prepare students for once they leave college, right? Like how can we make those skills be things that are really going to be applicable? And something like that, you get to see that a student has to think about who is the true audience for this piece, right? How can I reach that true audience? What kind of permissions do I need to do this kind of work in a digital space that's going to be made available, right? And those are all really important questions for our time. And those questions are things that the students have to engage with when they do this kind of work.
Absolutely. So this particular collection, and both Veta's Students Project and this project are available loaded up on computers in the Foley Library right behind the information desk. So should you be interested in these projects, you're very welcome to go and click around, and one of the university archivists is there to answer any questions should you have any questions about these particular archives. So this particular project was produced by Dr. Emily Clark's Native American Religions class, and Dr. Clark is part of our Digital Humanities group, but she's at a conference this weekend, so academic obligations kept her from being here. But I had the great pleasure of helping her class facilitate this work, wherein we went into the archives and actually digitized a number of previously unavailable photographs from the 19-teens featuring the Native American King Islander community in Alaska. Now what's fantastic about this particular project is that students not only had to think about our Jesuit history as a Jesuit university, in thinking about reading Jesuit diaries of first contact with Native Americans and Jesuit diaries from the Alaskan missions. They read all of this primary source material and used that primary source engagement to contextualize the photos that they were then digitizing. All of the photos in this collection did not have any digital backup. They're simply sitting in manila folders up in our archive. So by digitizing this collection and contextualizing it as best as they could, the students make these photographs available to the Native American King Islander community that's represented therein. We've had letters sent to one of our archivists from current King Island community members asking if we had any records from their mission, and we were never able to send them because the photographs are far too brittle and difficult to copy. But they're not difficult to digitize. By making this humanities task digital, we democratize our archives. How many of you have sat in an archive and thumbed through a photo or a Jesuit diary from the 19-teens? Very few of us. Trust me, it's amazing. But very few of us get that opportunity. By engaging our students in archival research and making it digital, we provide access to the ivory tower that's sometimes removed from the communities represented therein. And this is particularly important at a humanistic Jesuit university because it's part of our mission to make sure that we ethically engage with the communities around us. And so this particular example, I think, is meaningful in that students had to really think carefully about what they were including here. We have these photos with no record or idea of who these folks are in the photos. Here are just some examples. So when we were in the archive, I had the fantastic experience of watching a group of university students struggle with digitizing these photos and photoshopping to make sure they were as clear as possible. And I heard the most fantastic discussions amongst these students. They got their white gloves on and touched the old brittle photos, which was pretty exciting. And then students would think about, all right, I need to lighten the background so I can see the faces a little bit better. And having to have an actual conversation about what are the ethics of potentially lightening the faces of the individuals in these photos. Now that is something that's, as academics, we always want our students to think about, and we want to encourage those conversations in class. But to have them come up with that dilemma on their own, and to be talking about that in the archives as they have the text in front of them, it was truly a powerful moment for me as a teacher. I think I legitimately snapped a photo of those students and was like, I want to high-five you all, but I can't right now because you're white-gloved. It was such a powerful moment, and those types of transformative moments that I think digital platforms allow us in classrooms that just a typical written analytical essay don't allow. So these examples are pretty powerful in that also students had to think about what our presumptions are when we see photos like this. So very often the students were like, oh, well, clearly this is a husband, wife, and child. And I had to ask them, well, how do we know that? If we're sending these photos to relatives of these people in these communities, you don't really want to marry a brother and sister with their younger sibling, do you? They agreed no, they really didn't want to do that. So again, there's this powerful moment where students have to think about what type of web content they're producing. We live in an increasingly digital world. I'm always shocked at how glued to their phones and laptops my students are. So by asking them to think about what digital technology does in humanities classrooms, we ask them to be very careful and considerate consumers and also producers of digital media. So students had to think about who actually produces the content and what the effect of this content is in a world where we just constantly are streamed with digital media all the time. So this is a great example. We've also set up a Mac outside, just outside of this auditorium. If anybody wants to just click through, we've loaded up these websites if you wanted to click through and have a look. So I think that these are good examples of what digital humanities really does, but it doesn't just have to be going into an archive and digitizing material. Ginger and Jessica, you do fantastic work with multimodal composition. Do you want to explain what that is to the audience and what that looks like?
We, even though our students, like Katey says, are constantly glued to this stuff, they're kind of unaware of the implications of being glued to it and using it. And so we try to provide some education for them to step back and have some kind of meta thinking about the use of technology. And so we build assignments starting with a traditional essay, and they all know how to do it so well. They have been writing essays, and writing since they were, 5. So they're experts in it. And then we move into a different mode. We have them produce an audio essay, essentially a podcast, in which they have to understand all the affordances or capabilities of that mode. So now I can't just use however for my transition. I can't just cite things on the reference page. I have to figure out how best to get that information to my audience with sound only. So now they are thinking about a different mode, and we build on that to go to visual, and eventually we get to a video essay, and each of these has a written component. I mean, we are English teachers, and we do have to know how to write. But like Katey says, eventually we're not going to be writing at all. Everything will be on a screen. It's just the way we're going. And so they need to learn how to reason, articulate, back up their argument with understanding how to use all those affordances. So I'm disappointed that I didn't think about examples. I could have brought a couple of examples of video essays that my students are doing, but that will be at a later panel today.
At 1 o'clock today in Hemmingson 314, we have some of the students who produced this particular exhibit, and 8 students in total who have worked in a variety of different disciplines within the College of Arts and Science who are presenting their work firsthand. So if you're interested in digital humanities, I can't tell you how impressive these students are. Please come back at 1 o'clock in 314. I've been meeting with them all week, and they are fantastic examples of what digital humanities can do at Gonzaga.
And even when they're not going to blow you away, what we're trying to do is get them to think about, like I said, the capabilities and affordances in ways that they're not now. Right now, they're being used by their technology. They don't own it in a way that allows them to articulate or be a part of a bigger community, except for social media. And they really don't understand how social media uses them. So part of multimodal writing is understanding that role that they have and how they're being used by and can produce the information. One thing I did want to say that's kind of fun for my students is because of the digital platforms, the walls are gone of the classroom. So any student that I have who wants to collaborate with any other of my 80 students can do so. We have all kinds of platforms for them to work together. They don't even have to be face-to-face, but they can create without, even being in the same room. So
earlier this week, I had a meeting with a communication studies faculty member who's interested in digital humanities, and we had a discussion about how she's using a Tumblr page in her class to provide an online public forum for her students to think about media consumption. And in that conversation, she gestured to how exciting it was that in that Tumblr page, which is not restricted to just her class, students from a friend of hers who teaches at NYU have started contributing. So now all of a sudden, by virtue of this digital technology, we have Gonzaga students sharing and building content and information with students from across the country whom they'll probably never meet, but have created this academic intellectual community in this public forum. So there are lots of exciting opportunities to think about how our students produce this knowledge that feels very different than the essay that I get handed at the end of the semester. So there are opportunities for our students to really take ownership here.
And I think not only is it, are these projects fun for students, but we feel that we have a responsibility to them if we are going to prepare them to be readers and thinkers and writers in the 21st century, right? We have to address some of this stuff, right?
And we're, I'm probably the oldest one here, and probably all of your age, more like, but they know more about technology use, application than we do, but that kind of doesn't matter. What the application is going to change by the day. What we do want is to feel some ownership and some way of taking control of that space. And that's, like she said, that's really an ethical consideration for the 21st century. The definition of literacy has completely changed. It's not reading and writing anymore. It's knowing how to use multiple streams of information, analyze them, synthesize them, vet them at once. Knowing your audience, knowing the best capabilities of the technology or the platform that you're using. There is so much to know now. I feel behind all the time. I feel like I'm racing after something, and I'm so delighted that our dean has given us the space to create this digital humanities initiative, because I think it's so important, and I feel like we're racing after it still.
It's also particularly important in thinking about what the humanities student is pitching themselves when they go on the job market these days. I hear frequently from students who somehow I've convinced to be an English major that they're a little worried about what they do after the fact. Maybe they're not interested in teaching at the collegiate level like I am. Maybe they're not interested in writing the next American great novel. But they are interested in literature and language and the humanities more broadly. When we give our students actual technology skills, humanities majors end up in so many different career fields because they've been well-versed in critical thinking skills. When we give them actual technology skills that they can pitch to employers and actually show them content that they've created, it changes the game in how our humanities majors market themselves after they leave our classrooms entirely. And in thinking of that, I wonder, one of the questions that we thought we would kick around today and also see what you all think about is why digital humanities at Gonzaga? So digital humanities as a field happens by and large at large research universities with huge library consortiums that build these platforms, that build some of the tools that we're using here. So I'm wondering from our faculty members who teach in digital humanities, what makes digital humanities unique at Gonzaga? How does it inform your understanding of Gonzaga students and Gonzaga identity?
Jesuit.
Yeah, I think that it does really reinforce what makes Gonzaga unique among private and public colleges and universities. And it's the Jesuit-informed liberal arts education that we offer here. And so you've certainly had students working through their core requirements, right? All those broad classes that they have to take. And this is part of educating the whole person, making our science and engineering majors sensitive to what it is about literature that is beautiful and expressive of the human condition. And so I think that's part of the reason why we need this, and we see this at Gonzaga, because it reinforces this fundamental mission of the university that's informed by Jesuits, the Jesuit education model, focus on humanities and focus on having our students broadly educated in knowledge.
And them thinking that it matters. So engineering students, traditionally my engineering students didn't want to be in my class. Well, I'm here, I'm never going to write. But now, like what you said, interdisciplinary. So they're working across disciplines to understand that writing has or history or any of the traditional liberal arts humanities courses have a place in engineering. They have to figure out how to make it all get across. And so without the digital platforms, our students were definitely more, separated.
Isolated.
Yeah, isolated. And this really changes the game that way.
It also provides an incredible amount, and we have some key visions of the Ignatian and Jesuit vision that we originally used to help think about how we were outlining digital humanities and the Digital Humanities Initiative here at Gonzaga. So these are some of the key components that helped us think about the types of projects we would like to have our students complete in their classrooms. So these key visions are seeing life and the whole universe as a gift, calling forth wonder and gratefulness. And when I talk to my students about how using digital platforms might inspire wonder and gratefulness, they give me a nice eye roll back in the head, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I recognize Jesuit language in front of me. So I'm curious, in our experiences in classrooms, have we seen students experience or express wonder and gratefulness at getting a tool to work? Or how do we see this as being embodied in digital humanities here at Gonzaga?
Wonder and gratefulness, that's a tall order for my freshmen.
But Katey, I totally want to dodge that question and ask all of you to attend the student session this afternoon, because when we were talking with my student who's going to present, and she did something entirely different from what you've seen here. The question she was asking about this, I don't even know how to describe it. So it's, she developed walking tours of Gonzaga using Gonzaga's history. So you just have to go to the session to find out more details. It's a wonderful project. But when she was asking questions about what do people get from this, what are they learning, and how can you see changes in campus reflecting larger changes going on in Spokane and the U.S., I think that it's a wonderful response to your question about wonder and questioning and inquiry. that the students do much better, a much better job at.
There is this process of discovery that happens, and
Yeah.
as a teacher, you always want your students to have this aha moment or this discovery of their ability to enter into an academic conversation. What I think digital technology and digital technology in the humanities classrooms does is not just have them engage in an academic discussion with me, which often ends up feeling a little bit transactional. They hand me their paper and I hand them a grade, which is not really what we want to have happen in our classrooms. It ends up being transformational in some way because they feel like they're actually producing material that matters. In my work with the Omeka site on the King Islander community, a student very honestly was talking to Dr. Clark, his grading faculty member that semester, and he was like, yeah, you know, I can't just BS this because it's going to live in the world. Which was both fantastic, this moment of wonder, and I was grateful that he was taking it very, very seriously, but I also thought, so you've just been BSing papers this whole time. So it does something very different for students that I think is really important. He was in awe over the fact that his words would exist in the world and impact a whole range of communities. And that, I think, leads into the second bullet point about giving ample scope to the imagination and emotion as well as intellect. We're asking our students when they engage in an audio essay and pair it with a video and pair it with the written word to be creative, to think about the emotional responses their audiences are going to get from the content they're producing. And as a teacher, you want your student to think about those things, but it can be hard to get them to think about those things in a dry academic essay, a paper that they hand me. So there's real opportunity for our students to use imagination and intellectual engagement, and that's where the next best thinkers will come from, people who can marry all of those different mediums. In particular, I think in looking at imagination, emotion, as well as intellect, I'm struck by a project that we're currently working on that's not available in any visual format yet. We have an environmental sciences professor who's had his students trace the history of environmental impact within the greater Spokane area for the last several years. So we're looking at how building and different progress movements have really shaped the environment around us. So he's had his students go into the archives and look at how building around Gonzaga's campus has reshaped the local geography. Now he's had his students build all of that content, and it's been sitting there on his computer hoping to turn into a web page. With the Digital Humanities Initiative, we're pairing his students' content up with some computer science students who are learning how to build web pages. So our students are building content for other students to learn from, which is the end goal of a humanistic Jesuit education. We're all helping each other here. And then ultimately that content should help the world and improve it at large. With that comes the need to understand freedom, need for discernment, and responsible action. In building that webpage content, all of those students who are learning about environmental studies are learning about how to responsibly showcase this information and the impact. Any other thoughts about those bullet points for your guys' classes?
Well, I think we have 5 minutes, right?
Oh, do we?
So maybe
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
open it up to questions?
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. I was getting all jazzed up about the bullet points. So we have about 10 minutes left, actually. So does anyone have questions about what digital humanities is? We know that it's sort of a big amorphous definition that's hard to pin down. But any questions about digital humanities at large or here at Gonzaga?
Here at Gonzaga, so this is all very interesting what you're doing. So it looks like these projects right now have been focused on individual faculty members and probably individual courses. So how does a student, decide he wants to get involved with something like this? I mean, it's sort of serendipitous that he enrolls in a class.
He happens to show up in one of ours.
Before, or, how is this moving towards I don't want to say the rest of the curriculum, but really, graduation? What are they going to have? I mean, obviously in their own CV.
In their own portfolio.
In
that
their
they
own
can walk away
portfolio,
from.
they'll have, yes, I did this, and I did this in this class, I did this in that class, but how does it sort of culminate? Either it's like you minor in it, or it's part of your
So that's a fantastic question, and something that we as a working group are still in the early phases of developing. So this is the first year of the initiative, and currently we're trying to enroll as many faculty members as we can in teaching these teaching these technologies in these classroom spaces. One of the key ways that a student could learn about digital humanities and recognize that, hey, maybe if I am in Professor Halliday's class, I'll get to do this, is it will be a key component in our course descriptions. So the way we offer our course descriptions that students read when they think about what they're signing up for classes, we'll mention that we're doing projects like this. So students will get to know. And then ideally, with the revision of our new core here at Gonzaga, we have a real opportunity in the first year seminars, which are inherently interdisciplinary, to get our students to think about interdisciplinary approaches and how the digital world encouraged us to think about how the sciences and the humanities really come together nicely. So that's a really great question that we're working at this year. Our hope is that eventually there'll be some sort of course designation that students could see, saying, oh, I really liked doing multimodal composition in Ginger or Jessica's class, so maybe now I want to take a history class with Veta because that was a really cool project. Mm-hmm. The other thing that will be useful is our new Digital Humanities webpage that's just recently rolled out on the College of Arts and Science page. On that webpage, we'll be able to showcase projects that students are doing. So there'll be links showcasing student projects, and also we'll have a list of students who are building projects. So if I'm going to a potential employer and I want to say, hey, I have this project, it's not just me handing them a website that I've built, but it's filtered through an academic medium, so it looks very professional.
And then one other question, so the student symposium this afternoon,
yes.
That's in this room, or is it up?
314 upstairs in one of the conference rooms. And if you go, I promise the students are so fantastic.
Because I want to bring my son.
They're really great.
I'd really like him to see
That's a great idea.
I wish I would have brought him to this.
Bring your son and say, look at what these students are doing.
Right, and that's
so
exactly, I mean,
find them.
The students these days are so visual that, being able to concretely see that, I think will be very important.
Other questions, queries, concerns?
Comments? Yeah.
Or feedback? Do you want your students to be enrolled in classes that
Yes.
do this?
How many of you have freshmen?
This semester? Oh, I should ask for names. I'm teaching freshman classes this semester.
As are we.
Katey, would you talk a little bit about your collaborations, because it includes faculty members from different schools, from Foley Library, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely. When we say that digital humanities is interdisciplinary as a field, that's absolutely envisioned in how we're looking at our working group here. So we're a small selection, all from the humanities presenting today, but in our working group we have Dr. Rob Bryant, who is a professor in computer sciences and also the program director for the new computer science and computational thinking degree, which actually tries to marry humanities interests with computer science students. We have Brett Hendricks, who is the director of the College of Arts and Science Computer Labs. We also have Caitlin Bagley, who is an instructional librarian in Foley Library, and we've been working with Foley Library to partner and build access to the archives and think about ways that we can use the library more meaningfully. I know my students are often afraid of the library, which is also one of the problems with digital technology. They want to Google everything instead of going and looking in the library with the good sources. So we're really working with the library to meaningfully partner with us to engage the students in real academic work, not just fun projects.
Can I just interrupt real briefly? One of the things our library does that's so great is has a kind of a Nebo. What is the
Like
platform?
an instant
It's an instant messenger. So I show my students really early on. I know you're afraid to go talk to the reference librarians, but they will save you lots of time and they know a lot. Let's bring one up. Then I put it up on the screen, and I know the reference librarians, so I can be funny with them. Are you there? Yes, I'm here. It's Professor Halliday's class. We have some questions for you. Go ahead. And this is 24/7. It's not all Gonzaga librarians. It's, I don't know who the other librarians are. It's all over the place.
They contract out, yeah.
Other
it's
Jesuits.
the world.
So any time of day or night, they can ask a question of a reference librarian and get an answer. It's amazing. So they can't be afraid anymore. Now they can anonymously type.
It's also worth noting one of our other working group members is Dr. Pavel Schlossberg in the online master's program through Gonzaga University through Communications and Leadership Studies. So we also have an opportunity to ask our students to think about how the skills that they're building in their classrooms now might help them in postgraduate study, not just in the employment world. Any other questions? Thank you so much for joining us this
Yeah, thank
morning,
you
and
very
I hope it
much.
stops raining for the rest of the day.
Thank you.